Hello, everyone. Welcome to our one of our final sessions for the Microsoft AI Chat App Hack. I'm Pamela. I'm from the Python advocacy team at Microsoft, and I'm joined today by an MVP who is not somebody who works at Microsoft, but is an expert at Microsoft technologies and loves to share that knowledge. Charles, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, Charles Elwood, and half Thai. I've got my Thai letters on my name down here. But yeah, I'm unique in the MVP world, I think, because I came from the business side. So systems engineer, project manager, director of project management, and then just kind of came in sideways into this wonderful world of RAG and AI and everything. So yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun today and I'm glad you're here, Pamela, because then you can explain all the stuff I don't understand about this. So
That's great. Yeah, so we're excited to have Charles today because he's going to present about ways to build these applications without using so much code. Because for the last few weeks, we've actually been giving lots of presentations about how to hack on these open source RAG chat applications, with like full on Python and all that. But the reality is that, it's becoming accessible for lots of people to do it, which is great, right? Programmers shouldn't have all the fun. So I'm excited for Charles to share his knowledge today. So let's go over to Charles' presentation now.
yeah, so if we switch over, so I got a bunch of different screens up here, and I've learned in the age of AI, live demos are cool, but sometimes it's hard to, sometimes there's glitches, right? So I'm going to mix. So what I did the other day is do a live screen capture of the full process of setting up the app. And you can see that in the lower right here. So I'm going to demo that first. And then I have a video of the whole process. So we're going to walk through that and then go through some of the fears. I mean, there are moments like I ran into errors and, I was like, do I turn on Cosmos? I was like, Cosmos, like, how much is that going to cost me? Fears like that for a business user. Those are the things that creep up. So I'm going to talk about those. And then also I'm going to try to walk through the actual process live, once everything's set up, in the chat playground and kind of in the Azure portal too. So this is going to be fun. We're going to be switching around. And then Pamela, jump in, please, with explanations because this is all new to me. And I just want to do a plug so I watched your video this morning. I forget the title of this one, but you walk through RAG and all the different elements and explained vector search and vector databases and everything. And I found this so helpful. So I just, I don't know if there's a title down here, but I went through this video and it was incredible. But so I'm going to start here. So this is the final app. And what's really cool is I did turn on chat history, and that's what brought in Cosmos behind the scenes, I believe. And then I loaded 2 documents behind the scenes on this. One is the regions that are supported. So I'm going to ask the question, say which regions support, let's say GPT-4. And
can you zoom in?
Let's see.
Just like Control Plus on it, maybe?
Yeah, let's do Control Plus. Oh, here we go.
Nice.
Okay, too far. And then if people want to put in the comments too, I think, is Josh behind the scenes looking at comments and everything?
Yeah, I'm looking at comments.
Okay. So we got comments. So send your comments in. But this was really cool because I ran into, Pamela, you had told me about the regions. There's quotas, how many deployments of GPT-4 you can put in a certain region like West USA. And as a non-developer, this was all foreign to me. And I found, I don't know if we can put the link up, but there's a Learn document link with all of the regions spelled out. But I kept having to go back and go through that table. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to load it into RAG, put it into my app, and then just chat with it, right? And then it works beautifully. You can see here all the availability, all the regions, GPT-4, and it gives you the reference. So this is grounded. And I was like, what a beautiful thing. This is the problem I was struggling with setting this thing up, and then I solved the problem with itself. So I don't know if there's any comments or questions about that.
No, not yet. I'll let you know.
All right. And so I'm going to minimize this now. And then we're going to start walking through the process in the video. So I think what I did first, and this may be not what every person that comes into this does, is I went and set up a resource group. And then I set up, so here I'm setting up the resource for Azure OpenAI. But I wanted to talk about resource groups real quick, and let's see if I go over. I think I have another one, and this is kind of a trick I learned, because after a while, if you come into Azure without knowing about resource groups, you end up with hundreds and thousands of resource groups, and then things get scattered. And when you want to delete stuff, it's really, really hard to find. So I'm going to go into the one I set up for this project. And what's really cool is if you set up a resource group and create all the resources in one resource group, you can delete it all at once, or sometimes the studio makes resources and adds it, and you don't even know it's happening. But then when you go back and look at the resource group, it's all there. Like, you're like, oh, this is what it did behind the scenes. So I just wanted to point that out, because that was kind of a lesson learned I had on, like, the hard way. It's like, what resources did it set up? And then I finally had figured out how to look at all the resources. I don't know, Pamela, do you have anything to add to that? Or
yeah, I think resource groups are great because, you can group them all together. Can you zoom in again? I feel like you have like a big monitor over there, because things tend to look a little small.
Is it Control Plus?
I actually made a resource group this morning to put 60 resources in, because I wrote a script to see if I could deploy free app service to every single region. so that's also useful too, for like just doing little experiments to see what you can do. And then when I was done, I just deleted that whole resource group. So
is it Control Plus?
Yeah, it's usually Control Plus, I think, on a Windows.
Oh, I'm on the other screen. That's why. Aha, there we go.
There we go. Yeah, now we can.
So you can see the resource groups on the left. I have a whole bunch, and it gets really confusing when you have so many resource groups. So yeah, we'll go back to the video.
We did have a question about pricing and whether pricing, because you brought up the regions, and the question was whether pricing is the same across the regions. And I actually am not positive on that. Do you know offhand? I'm just looking at the pricing page now.
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't. And so this is, I'm browsing that one site now that shows all the regions.
Yeah, and if you click on pricing in that left side, see there's a left side nav.
Yeah. So this is the video. So let me try to find up, let me search for it. Regions.
Oh yeah, pricing. It's Azure OpenAI service pricing is the page. Because generally it's true that pricing does vary per region for Azure services. So I usually don't give an exact price estimate, and that's why Azure has this pricing calculator. So if you're not sure, you can always use the Azure pricing calculator and specify your region and then what things you're going to be using. But I actually thought for Azure OpenAI that potentially they were the same across regions. But now I'm just kind of clicking around and trying to see if they change. So yeah, you see that there. Yeah, and then you can change the region at the top there.
Ah, okay. So that's a great question. I'm learning something. So yeah, East and then West US. Oh, and the availability shows up here too.
You definitely see that the availability changes. I haven't been able to see yet whether actual pricing has changed. Like Sweden Central actually has everything. Sweden Central is a great region. If you're never sure, just deploy to Sweden Central because it has everything right now.
That's funny. That's what I use for everything now. But I'm like, this is funny because my region is all the way on the other side of the world.
Yeah, it's just a good region for.
I'm just browsing, and to answer the question as I'm browsing, it looks like they're the same, the pricing.
Yeah. Okay, and can you zoom in again? Sorry.
Okay.
The
Okay.
resolution's tricky. Okay, that I think is a good level. So yeah, it does look like the pricing's the same. I think it's usually true that Azure has variability across regions, which is why we don't give exact prices. But I think it's possible that Azure OpenAI is more consistent. But I was saying
Yeah.
there is a pricing calculator that you can use where you enter in all the services you're going to use. So you enter in like, oh, I'm using app service, I'm using document intelligence, I'm using OpenAI, and then you give like some estimates for how much you're going to use it. And then it can give you, it can give you your estimates. Yeah.
And I'm just going to go, yeah, so you can select all your resources. So, oh, this would have been good yesterday when I was scared to click on the Cosmos button.
Yeah.
So yeah, cool. So hopefully that answered your question. And then, so I'm going to find this page too. So this is the regions page, or actually I showed it to everybody. And what I did is I copied and pasted into Word. And the reason I did that, and after watching your video, Pamela, was I tried it in PDF, but I think the PDF generated without fonts. So my app couldn't pull out the text. So what I did is I converted everything into Word with the text pasted in, and then it could go through the text. But I think you were saying in the other video is there's a way to do that with image text extraction with maybe GPT-4 with Vision. Is that correct?
Yeah, GPT-4 Vision is what you need to use if you're trying to reason about images, like you want it to answer a question about an image. But in
Yeah.
terms of extraction, then typically I would just use Azure Document Intelligence because it can now extract from PDF, DocX, PPDX.
Oh yeah.
It can extract from all those places now. But this is only the very latest version of Azure Document Intelligence.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. So that's a good point. Yeah, I've used Azure Document Intelligence separately. But all right, so we're going to walk through the video a little bit more. And then if anybody has any other questions. So here I'm setting up. So what I did first is I went into the portal and I set up 2 instances. I did GPT-4. And then I also, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if you want to use vector embeddings, you have to use Ada, right?
Yep.
So I set up 2 Azure instances. So let me go into the portal just to show everybody that.
Yeah, we're gonna need to zoom in on everything.
Okay. Yeah.
For the video. So maybe with the video, if you maximize it.
Oh, gotcha. Yep. So I'm going to go, I think, manage deployments. And this takes me into the portal. And then I'm going to zoom in. So I went and created 2 deployments first, GPT-4. And can we see the region over here? I think, so I was full in Sweden, Central. So I had to create this in a different region. I think I used France for this. And then I did the Ada text embedding, a second one for the vector search embeddings. And I think quotas is here, right? And I wanted to show everybody this is where you can select your region. And I kept running into this error, but you could see here, I've used 100% of my quota in East US. So I kept getting an error. But then I went to France. I think it's, or Sweden Central. Let's just look at that. But you could see, you can open this up and kind of see which resources are set up in each region. So I don't know if you want to add anything to that. Oh, zoom. So Josh is telling me to zoom. Okay. So yeah,
there's a typing sound, but I assume that's from a colleague.
Oh yeah, that's my son over here. He's got a mechanical keyboard.
I see. It's a very mechanical keyboard.
All right, so I'm going to zoom in.
Okay, I can see that.
I zoom in over here. There we go. Not zooming in very far, but So maybe I'm going to demo just on the screen then.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to jump to the portal again, or actually in Azure OpenAI, and we're just going to follow the steps.
Nice.
So it's chat, and then if you go to add your own data, and then add source, and I'm going to try to select the sources I've already created. So upload files is the one I chose, which was nice for a beginner and maybe a business user. Blob storage, I created one for this app. And the other day in the video, what I was doing was I would create the resource using this link down here. However, there was a time lag, and I wanted to let the audience know. So sometimes you have to wait a couple minutes and then press refresh just for the whole system to sync up, because sometimes your resources won't set up correctly if you click it too early. And then I had to do cross-region origins resource sharing. Had to turn that on for the blob storage for the files to feed into the system. So I tried it without this one time and it didn't work. So this was just a simple click to turn on. And then here, so I believe this is the AI search. So this is where I need your help, Pam. So I set this up. This was actually, when I was doing this the other day, this took the longest. It took kind of 20 minutes, I think, for this to set up. And I wasn't, from your video, it sounds like this is the actual database where all the like vectors are stored. Is that correct?
Yeah, and you're right that the Azure AI search is probably the resource that takes the longest of everything that you need for this, and the team is aware of that and trying to improve that. But yeah, so Azure AI search, it's going to be the search engine, the knowledge base, the database, however you want to think of it, and it's going to store both text and vector, which is what's great about it, is that it's going to actually be able to do these hybrid searches on both the text and the vector, and that's how you get the best results. And that's what my video was about.
So text and vector being, is that the semantic and the text part and kind of a hybrid? Is that what you mean by text and vector?
Yeah, so it's like, you imagine you've got that document about the region, so it's going to store, like each paragraph of that document is a different chunk in its index, and so for each chunk of that document, it'll store the actual text, like the characters of it, and then it'll also store a vector embedding, and a vector embedding is a list of numbers.
Yeah.
And it's always, with the ADA model, it's always going to be 1,536 numbers to be precise. And you can make an embedding of anything. And the whole point of embeddings is that you can then compare the similarity between one embedding and another, and it captures things that we can't capture with just comparing text. And the example I always give is underwater, right? If you have the word underwater and you do a vector embedding, it'll actually match it to a paragraph about snorkeling or scuba diving, even if it never says the word underwater, because in the vector space, you have to imagine like this vast multi-dimensional space of concepts that are similar to each other. In the vector space, underwater is similar to snorkeling and scuba diving.
Oh, I love that. And so maybe I could show this a little bit later, but I was doing all of this in the Azure, the studio here. And this is very like top layer. So you didn't get to see behind the scenes, but I remember going into my resource group and clicking on the vector search. And then there was a tab where you can actually type in a query and it would show the response. I think there was text and then a bunch of numbers that were the vectors, I think you're calling it, right? And so once I did that, then it all kind of made much more sense to me. But seeing this front layer, I wasn't able to see that behind the scenes. Okay, so that makes much more sense. So maybe we could show that in a second too. And then index name. So can you kind of help understand the index? So there's the Azure
search.
Yeah.
In Azure search service, you can have multiple indexes. I actually have one that has like 20 indexes. So that
Oh,
can be useful if you're like developing, some people like to separate indexes for different use cases. So if you've got like, you could use the same search service for different chat apps, right? You could have one that's chatting on Azure documentation, one that's chatting on internal HR data, and they're completely unrelated, right? So you just put them in different indexes. So the most
gotcha.
common use case there is like you can use that same search service,
Hmm.
but you could make different indexes for different applications, different very distinct sets of data, right? If it's a distinct set of data, you'd probably want to do a new index.
Yep.
Also, if you're doing multi-language stuff and you could search in English, you could search in Spanish. Some people might choose to do an index for Spanish versus an index for English. You can also
Yeah.
do like multiple, like you can have a Spanish field and an English field within the same index, but that might be another situation where people might use it. So yeah,
Oh,
you just
wow.
think of like different indexes for different sets, distinct sets of data, different chat applications.
So I have a question for you. So if you wanted to do, let's say, like the OCR with vision,
Hmm.
um, and then you wanted to do another one just for text Word documents, is this where you would create an index for the documents that are image based, and then another index for the text based ones, and combine them?
Yeah, that's a good question. I can often throw those into the same index. If I want to
Yeah.
be able to search on them at the same time,
Yeah.
then I put them in the same index. That's
Oh, gotcha.
generally my approach, right? If I expect my search to be able to search across all both those documents, then they belong in the same index.
Okay.
What we do is like you can it could be that in some of those chunks like maybe don't even have any text, and that's
Yeah.
okay. That would
Hmm.
just be empty, and then the text part wouldn't get matched.
Gotcha.
So I would, if I want to search at them at the same time, I put them in the same index. And Pallavi asked, "Do you have to upload documents in advance,
Um,
or you do that
I
after
think that's in the next
next step?"
window. So yeah, so let me just finish this out then. That's a great question. Um,
Pallavi also asked about adding vector search to the search resource. So
okay.
Azure AI search defaults to just full text search, which is just a text search. They only recently added vector search as an option, and you do have to opt into that because that does mean you now need an embedding model. So it's going to cost a little bit more money because you actually have to do that embedding stage, and that's using up like OpenAI tokens in order to run that embedding model. So that is why they ask, because anytime something's going to cost more money, they're usually going to ask, whether you want to add that.
So I'm a little stuck here, Pamela. So I have that embedding model
Yeah.
created, but it's not showing up here. So I wonder if I have to.
And there's nothing in that drop down.
No, it's not pulling it up. So I'm going to go off of this and come back on and try to just refresh everything.
Let me try. You could also, you could also just not add vector search, and
Okay.
then
And then I just go to the next step
yeah,
for now.
there you
Okay.
go. Deselect that, and there we go.
All
Yeah,
right.
but
And
you could
then
also see
so
that
so
it could be a buggy UI.
yeah. And I saw a little bit of that where. So this is where I would upload. I forget who asked. And then there's two steps. So you pick the file and then you do the upload. And then there's 4 or 5 other methods, I believe, right, Pamela? There's blob storage. You can set up blob storage at the beginning and upload your files manually or write a script. And I wasn't sure of the other ways that you've tried to upload your files.
I haven't used this very much, so I mostly just use blob storage.
Blob storage? Okay.
Pretty much what I use. Yeah, I mean it's I know this also supports like Cosmos and maybe some other stuff as well, but I personally have only used blob storage.
And it's super cheap. So when I use that, when I was beginning, I was like, "What is blob storage?" And then I looked at the pricing. I was like, "Ooh, this is wonderful!" And you just throw whatever you want in, right? um, and then this was really cool. The chunking. So I see now this is different. When I had vector turned on, there was keyword, semantic, and then hybrid.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you just do without vector search, is this keyword.
Yep.
And then the chunking is interesting. I want to touch a little bit on that because chunking is something I'm learning about. And you recommended in the video 512, whereas this is defaulting to 1024. But yeah, kind of talk about chunking. So I'm new to all that. So yeah, what is that? Why is it needed?
Right. Yeah, that's a great point. So when we're making these chat applications, ultimately what's going to happen is that when the user asks a question, we get back the documents from the knowledge base, and we send both the user question and the documents to the large language model. But the problem is that our documents could be really long, right? And so if we pulled back the entire document, we might be sending like a 10-page document to the large language model. And that's problematic for two reasons. One is that it may not even fit inside the limits of the large language model, because each LLM has a context window, which is how many tokens you can send to them maximum. So that's an issue where you could just go over that context window. But two, even if it fits inside the context window, LLMs have a tendency to get lost if they're given too much information at once. And there's this paper about it called Lost in the Middle that actually did research to figure out, how much was too much information, where it would just start missing things. They did all these tests where like they sent it, different amounts of information chunked at different rates to see when it would start missing information. So we want to send just the right amount of information so that it has the answer, but that it's not so much information that the LLM, gets lost in all that content. So that's where chunk size comes into play. It's how big are the chunks going to be that it takes from your document. So you've got a 3-page document. How is it going to chunk that up? Now it's done it's in terms of tokens here instead of characters, which is how you might think. I assume this is in terms of tokens. It actually doesn't have a unit on it, but let's assume it's terms of tokens. So a token is different from a word or a character. A token is how an LLM actually breaks stuff up. And in English, it's usually around 1 word to 1 token because it's seen a lot of English words. But in other languages like Chinese or Japanese, a word might actually take a couple tokens. So everything with LLMs is in terms of tokens, and that's why we think of the chunks in terms of tokens as well.
Interesting. And I remember going in like maybe a few months ago, and there was all this information about having to run a script on your tokens. So I was so happy to see, and I think you mentioned on the other video too, like it's integrated now in Azure Search. And then the other question I had is, I think at the time when I was looking at the scripts, I was always curious. So you take a whole like large document, you chunk it up, and then it must keep the configuration of what document it came from and what page and all that context, right? So that when it references, it knows, this is from PDF so-and-so and page 3. Because I was like, wow, you chunk it all up and, it must have to keep all that.
Yeah, that's a great point. So if you look at the index, you'll see, the actual like chunk of text, and then you'll see a field in that index for the file name where it came from, and then also a field for the page number inside that file name. That's how it's often done, so that we can trace things back.
So I wonder if we can go here, and is this zoomed in enough?
That's pretty good. You could zoom in one more.
Yeah. I'm going back into the chat and looking at one of the references. This one.
Yeah, and I think what it's showing you here is actually just showing you the full chunk. So different RAG chat applications will have different ways of showing the citations, and some of them will show you just the chunk. Some of them will show you the whole document.
Yeah.
So I think this might be showing you the chunk.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, and they're different. So part 1. So it's the same document. It's just showing the chunk where it came from. Very cool. All right. So I'm going to go back in here and let's finish this and see what it review and finish, save and close. And then, so this was fun. So you can kind of watch it ingesting and processing. And then we'll let it sit here for a second. But so Pamela, I'm curious. So ingesting and processing, so it's taking the documents, it's creating the vector inside of Agile and inside the database. And then when it's done, you type in something and it vectorize that, and it does that cosine thing, right? It compares what's in the database with what you just typed in and sees how close using trig, and then spits that back out and says, look, we found something that's really close. Is that what happens?
So that's how it does if we're using vector or hybrid search. But remember that we decided we didn't turn on that vector search for this one just because we weren't able to select the model. So in this case, it's just going to do a full text search, which is still going to be a pretty good search because as your AI search, it does spell checking, it does stemming, which means like if you have swim, you also have swim, swam, swimming, swims, right? So it's going to do all these, usual full text search tricks that we've used for, a long time in search engines. But since we didn't turn on vector search and we didn't give it an embedding model, it's not going to do that vector comparison. So what you described is totally correct when you turn on vector search. In this case, we don't have it.
Gotcha. So super cool. And it was super fast too. That was already done. So tell me about the regions that support GPT-4. Now that's not the document I loaded, so let's just see what happens. Okay, there's validation error. So of course this is a live demo, and you get some errors. And I wanted to point out what was interesting about the other day when I ran the video, and the video is hard to see, so I'll just describe it. But I did GPT-4, and I did I used Ada for the vector embeddings, and I asked a question, and I asked a follow-up question really, really fast. And it said there was a quota, and I had to wait 12 seconds. Have you seen that? And can you kind of, how do I get past that? Is there something I could turn on?
Yeah, so if you do see a quota issue, that probably has to do with your quotas tab. And so you could look at the quotas tab and see what they're set to, right? So so here it's using let's see, it said it was using 1160 fast. So what you can do is, let's see, we're looking at, we want to find the one you're actually using here. So you're using GPT-4. Wow, you live on the wild side. I always use 3.5.
3.5,
yeah. So just because GPT-4 tends to be a bit slower, and usually GPT-3.5 is plenty good. So when you look at that, so you can see what your tokens per minute is. So I think the one you were using was so that one's maxed out, right? If you look at that one, it says it's using 240 tokens per minute. So there, sorry, and when it's 240, it actually means 240,000. So 240,000 tokens per minute is a fair number. I don't think you would go over the quota, just you, when you're that. So I don't know what the quota was when you saw that error. But usually if you are having quota issues, you go and you check your deployments, you put them up to the max. The quotas are per region per model. So you get like up to a certain amount of tokens per minute per region per model. So if you've run out in that region, you could make a deployment in another region where you don't have any yet, and then you would get the max for that region, right? Which is often 240. So aim for 240 if you're going to release this to users. That's typically the max you can get. If you need more than that, you've got a few options. You can go with Azure has this provision units, PTU for Azure OpenAI, and that's where you actually get a dedicated capacity for you. That's when you're really gonna pay for it. Or also some people do load balancing basically, and this is where you're getting this is going to require some code for sure. But that's where you basically load balance between different OpenAI instances based off the token, like the rate limit errors that come back. So you imagine you've got multiple OpenAI instances, one of them gets a rate limit error, and so then you bounce it over to the other one.
Gotcha. So that's what load balancing you said. You can then move to another one once you're getting your limits. Got it. So it's super interesting. I didn't even know to look at this. And this is, you said 240,000
Yeah, and you think about it,
Yeah,
a single question and answer, you can think of that as about 1,000 tokens. A
gotcha.
single question answer, right? So you can imagine you could have 240 users asking a question each minute if you have 240K TPM.
Got it. All right, I'm learning so
We
much.
we we do have another question from Mim. Is
Sure.
how can we control the chunk sizes? So where it
Okay.
does the splitting. So my PDFs are broken into paragraphs, but the chunking often splits across paragraphs. I don't think you didn't have an option like that, right? When you set this up?
There was, and I wish we could. So there were 4 chunk sizes. It listed the 1024 as default, and I picked the 512 based on your
Mhm.
recommendation. But there were 2 more on the far ends. But I'm guessing she's asking maybe for the Python implementation. Is
Well,
there or
or maybe asking for this. So yeah, I was
yeah?
trying to figure out if they had a boundary condition because it's basically what is the boundary condition?
Hmm.
Because by default, the boundary condition is often at a sentence, and it sounds like Mim wants to split at the paragraph. So it looks like
Oh.
this doesn't have an option. So yeah, I think you're right that
Hmm.
if you do need to customize the chunking more, then you have to dive into the code, right? And so
Yeah.
that's the thing about these approaches, like where they trying to make it easy for you, but by making it easy, it also means that a few options will be harder to customize.
And then, so I had a question about that. You gave me a GitHub repository,
Mhm.
and in that GitHub, um, is that code configurable to allow where the boundary is?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we have the one we've been working on, which is Azure Search OpenAI demo,
Yeah.
akka.ms/ragchat. We have all this ingestion code actually built into the repo, and
Hmm.
for the splitting, we have a sentence splitter, and we don't have any, and we have a simple splitter. Those are our 2 splitters.
Yep.
The sentence splitter like specifies what the sentence endings are. So if you were in a non-English language that used like the other kind of period, you would want to change those sentence endings.
Hmm.
And then it has like word breaks. But we don't have actually a paragraph text splitter. I think the tricky thing about paragraph text splitting is that not everything is actually in a paragraph. So you have to like make a decision at some point, like, well, there hasn't been a paragraph break. But if you
Yeah.
knew that all of your stuff was well formatted and had clear paragraph breaks, then you could write your own paragraph text splitter
Yeah.
to always split at the paragraphs if you knew that your content was well formatted like that.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah. Very cool. And I'm gonna see if I could find where in the video I saw that error. Boy, it really zoomed in. Oh, here it is.
Oh, I saw it. Yeah, the red area. Here we go.
Request Chatman says extensions operation have exceeded token rate limit of your current OpenAI pricing tier. So
Mhm.
please retire after 12 and check the quota. So yeah, I wanted to bring this up because I did see this, but I waited 10 seconds but it could be, I was doing this really, really fast. And what was interesting, I wanted to note this to the audience, is this whole process took about 26 minutes. And this included setting up every single resource. So the blob storage, the Azure search, everything. So it was really fast relatively. And the Azure AI search was the longest resource that was set up. So, and then today I try to reuse the resources I set up the other day. Um, but yeah, and can I ask, so I think you said it loses track of stuff in the middle. And is that what this is over here, retrieve documents to use? So it defaults to 5 over on the right
Mhm.
side.
Yeah, yeah. So that's basically related to the same point where you might think to yourself like, well, I'm just going to retrieve like 20 matching documents, right? And
Yeah.
when we say documents here, we really mean chunks. Each document, because
Oh,
as your
okay.
AI search calls them documents, but they're in this case they're actually chunks. So it's how many chunks are you going to retrieve? And you might think like, oh, I'll just retrieve 30 chunks because the answer is going to be somewhere there.
Yeah.
but then your LLM is going to get lost in all that information. So I think we actually default to 3 in
Mm,
the one we've been hacking on, but 5 is often a good number too. There's a
okay.
very good blog post at aka.ms/rag relevance. I'll see if we can flash it, which did research into the optimal like chunking size and numbers of documents to retrieve,
Okay.
and also like overlap between chunks. So yeah, so people have researched these things. There we go. There's that blog post.
So cool.
Yeah, so yeah, maybe like five is a good amount.
Yep. And so, yeah, I wanted to point that out because, yeah, after your video, I was like, oh, I would have turned on 10, but the more you have, it loses stuff in the middle. And then, so I wanted to show this, we got about 20 minutes left. And I wanted to throw a bonus. I was going to try some assistance and function stuff because that was just released this week, but let's try this, deploy this. So this is what I did the other day, and I just new app. And then I selected the subscription and then the resource group again, so I could find it later. And then the location. So Sweden Central, you said, is kind of the suite. It has everything.
It's a great one for OpenAI. I think it just generally has a lot of capacity right now.
And I think I'm going to run into a problem because I already have an app in free, but
Right.
should I just try it?
Like the limitation with app service is that you can only have one free app service per region. So if you've already made a free one, and basic is still fairly inexpensive.
Okay. So I'll go
it after.
And then so this is always a fair point, and I'm glad we addressed the pricing issue earlier. Is as a business user, I'm going in clicking all these things, and I was like, how much am I going to pay? So I'm glad we put that pricing calculator up and kind of the pricing sheet. And then this was a really scary one. I'm going to turn on Cosmos DB for this. Actually, does this take? It might take more time to turn that on, so maybe I won't do that.
All right, then you'd have to uncheck that enable chat history because
gotcha.
First box is for enabling, and the second box is for confirming that you enable it.
So this is what I did the other day, and I just wanted to show this final step, and it took a little bit. So this took some time too, but it's now deploying the app, and then I just look here and it's off and running. All right, so we'll wait for that. But then as I had this question too. When I did it this way, and I created the app this way, and when I deploy that app, it seems like, well, number one, it has the login and stuff, so it uses is it Entra? So there's security around it, and you'd have to add somebody to that resource. So it's kind of, it includes security in the box, out of the box. And then it did take some time for this app to load. So I wasn't sure if that was, something I did, or like prior to this, I started up the app, this particular app, and it did take some time to load, but it was really cool is it did require a login. So I had to authenticate before using this.
Yeah. So it's deploying to app service. And then when you deploy to app service, that means like it's literally like sending a zip of code over to app service. Yep. And you can even like export that code and modify it. So the cool thing about this no code approach is that you can actually get the code for it and then keep iterating on that code. And the code is actually pretty similar to the repo we've been hacking on. So that's something neat, is that you can kind of graduate if you want to mess with the code of the app, because this app also is a Python backend and a React front end. So it's a very similar code base to the one that we've been hacking on. It's just designed to be customized from that UI. So yeah, you deploy it means it's actually sending a zip of that code to app service and customizing it with all these variables. So if you want, we could look at your portal for
Yeah.
one of your deployed apps, and I want to show you the like environment variables, because that's what actually is just dictates everything about how the app works, because it's kind of like it deploys the same code for everyone and it customizes everything using app variables. Well, so you can find that. Yeah, zoom in a bunch, even more.
Yeah.
Then okay, and then click on one of those apps, like maybe the one that's already deployed. Yeah, the France
Yeah.
Central one. And then go to configuration under settings.
Oh, you know why that ADA vector search and some of the errors? I bet it's because all the resources are Sweden Central, but I was in France today.
Maybe.
I
I
want,
mean,
yeah.
you should be allowed to have resources across regions,
Mm.
but that might be related to it. So what you can see here is you can see all, and yeah, some of them you shouldn't show because they're secret. So
Yeah.
you
Yep.
can see all the variables, and these are what's actually configuring your app. So when you do a deploy, it actually is deploying the same code for everybody who does that deploy, and it
Yeah.
configures all of it using these environment variables. So you can actually, like, if there's something you want to change after the fact, you can actually just change it via this application settings, as long as it's
Wow.
configurable, right?
Yep.
So if it's configurable, and there's quite a lot of things that are configurable, I'm just looking at the Python code on my screen that actually brings in those variables. So if it
Yep.
is configurable, you can change it here and then restart the server and see it take place. So, and you were asking about, oh, the app is slow to start, right? So it takes
Yep.
time to upload that zip, and
Yep.
then for app service to actually build the application, like it builds this container for it, and then it starts serving it. And yeah, all of that takes time, especially if you're on free tier, because on free tier you're using shared resources. So
Oh,
generally,
gotcha.
whenever you're using the free tier for something, you're going to have higher latency because you're competing with lots of other people in that free tier, and
Yeah.
as yours not going to put a whole lot of effort into having good latency for the free tier, because the whole point of the free tier is to experiment.
Yeah.
Most of the time, you shouldn't actually be running like a user facing thing on the free tier, unless it's
Yeah.
something like static web apps. I think static web apps has like a production level free tier. But generally the free tier is for your experimentation.
Cool. Yeah, I would love to dig in further. And the code, you said you can access the code to the Python and React. Where would you go about?
That's a
For the
great
portal?
question. I just go to the repo itself, but yeah, can you go back to the portal and let's see if there's a download code button or something?
In here?
Or actually, or we can even look here. Let's look up here to maybe deployment center, to go up to deployment center.
Deployment
It's
center.
under
This one?
deployment center. Yeah, I want to see how it's configured here. Okay, so there you go. It actually links to the repo. So it's
Oh,
actually just directly pulling it from the main branch of that repo. So you can follow that link there. It's a public URL.
wow. And then
And
it's
then
just pulling your configuration variables in and launching it. This is so cool. I'm going to play with this and I'm going to follow up maybe in the comments, my experiments and see how far I get. So cool. All right. So I think we only have 10 minutes left. So I wanted to show assistants real quick. So I've been playing with assistants and I've made 2 assistants, and I told it the prompts. You are the great data analyzer, and the functions. There's code interpreter, and you add files. And I wanted your take on this. So how is this different from RAG, or is it RAG, the add files in assistants?
That's a great question, because I have not messed with it yet. I actually think it is RAG. I believe it
Okay.
is RAG. I think this was OpenAI. This is OpenAI's attempt at making a common thing easy.
Yeah.
And so I think that it's building in tools and building in RAG. And I hear it's also kind of building in conversation history. Like there's this notion of threads where this stuff gets stored in this thread. So I haven't played with it yet. Yeah. And there's definitely this part of me that's like, wait, should I just be switching everything over to assistants? And I don't honestly know the answer, because I think my fear is that maybe assistants it's a level of abstraction, like it's doing a lot for
Yeah.
us. And so
Yeah.
once again, like if we find we need customization, are we going to be able to customize enough? But I think it's a great thing to show in this session because we're talking about like no code, low code approaches.
Yeah.
Assistance is another thing, trying to make it easier to do common LLM tasks like tools and RAG. So I think it's a really good thing to explore.
Yeah. So cool. And then, so this is the one where I use the turbo, the fast, and then functions. I tried a little bit, and that seems to be taking whatever you type in your natural language and extracting, stuff in a format that other APIs can use, and then sending it off and connecting it to other APIs. Right? Do you have any comments on that, or?
So yeah, we actually did a session about functions yesterday and how
Yeah.
you can use them from the API. And I think of functions as a way of getting more structured results
Yeah.
from an assistant. So if I want to make sure, like it always tells me, so we say like, oh, get weather for city, right? And then
Yeah.
if it sees somebody asking about the weather for a city, then it'll say like, okay, we're looking for this city and this day or something. So it's for me, it's a way of getting more structured results
Yeah.
from an LLM. I haven't tried using it in the context of assistance to see like how you interact with it here. But
Yeah.
that's how I tend to use it from the API is like, all right, I need it to do more than just answer this question. I need it to, tell me exactly in a very structured form, what the user is asking for and what this parameter should be and what that parameter should be. And then you can use it to call an actual function,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like that's why it's called functions. That additionally, originally the idea was that like literally LLM would respond with get weather parentheses Los Angeles, right? Like an actual function call. And then you would like call an actual function, get weather Los Angeles, and maybe that would go to an API.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and that's how you can use it. I often will just use that function call and then abstract the parameters from it and then do some additional information with those parameters, right?
Interesting. And then code interpreter is so much fun. Yesterday, so you could see here, I downloaded data from the census website on Michigan, and I said analyze this data and then give me 3 plots of the most interesting trends, and it boom. I was like, wow, that was fast. So that was really, really fun. And I just wanted to briefly touch on this because I know this was just integrated this past week. And then, it was a neat addition for the business user if they wanted to try that. But, RAG, I've been playing with RAG a lot. And I just wanted maybe to end the call with, kind of like the demos I've been asked to give on RAG. So for example, training manuals are a big one. Let's say you have a production line and you have like 6 pieces of, or 20 pieces of equipment, robotics, and they all come with their manuals. And if you need, a technician needs to work on any of the manuals, they got to go look it up and find it. But imagine, so I've done some experiments, load them into RAG, and then that technician can just ask, like, I got this machine made by this, and boom, the answer comes up. And then any other applications you've heard a lot about of?
Yeah, I mean, so many for RAG. So doing RAG on government data, that's a fun one to do just for your own sake, so you don't have to browse through your government website to find everything, right?
Yeah.
But governments itself using it, like we're working with some governments that are trying to use it to make their information more accessible. We've also chatted with people using it for like sales, like to help sales associates based on manuals. So just what you're saying with manuals, right? So they're trying to quickly find an answer for a customer who's trying to pick, what to buy, and they can just really quickly go through the manual. The internal documentation is a huge one. Issue trackers is a big one. So yeah, there's just so many use cases. And I think what we've realized is that, we've had search engines for a long time. And those of us who are good at, like, I always thought I was very good at searching. I even did it competitively. I mean, this is like such a nerd thing, but I have competed in search Olympiads.
Yeah.
I didn't do that well because it was competitive. I mean, there's other people who were good at searching, but searching is hard, like knowing, what to search for. And then you have to click through the results and find the answers. So we have this potential with LLMs where they're actually pretty good at synthesizing information. And so it feels it feels like this is a way where we can make search more accessible to
Yeah.
more people, by not having this barrier to being really good at searching and knowing which one to click on. Right, we can use the
Yeah.
LLMs to do that for us.
Yeah, and that, as you're talking, like I was a systems engineer and a project manager before, and to put it in this context, in a business context, I was the bridge between two worlds, and there were requirements documents for systems engineering, for example, that were coming in different formats, sometimes PowerPoint, and then you had your engineering documents or your company side production documents, right? And they were all in different formats. And I can see this just being that bridge between the two sides and matching up the documents together. And then from a project management side, it was very, very similar, especially for budgeting and costing. And I can see this, you get the requirements document and you have all your pricing and estimating documents and process and procedures. And now this can patch the two sides seamlessly, which I mean, the applications are kind of boundless, I think. So yeah, and it's so cool that this was created, for somebody like me to be able to prototype in 26 minutes, something that I can show a customer, an end customer. And I think that's important for people, in the audience, is like this tool is here and it's so easy to create, to show somebody. Because I also get a lot of times is, I get the question marks, like, where would it even apply GPT-4 large language models? How would RAG integrate into my business? And I can listen to all their problems and prototype within a few minutes and give them a solution.
And do you have customers that are, just using this without any further code modification?
Yes, I do. And I also have ones that are really, really looking forward and like, hey, I have CAD drawings, images, and I want to extract the requirements and then, do an estimate off that. So yeah, I have a mix. They're all over the place. Some are stretching the boundaries. Some are just like, hey, this works. Let's go with this.
That's really cool. So Pallavi was asking about the sales use case and saying that that there with sales docs there tend to be a lot of them, and
Mm.
and Pallavi's saying the number of docs are limited, and I don't. That's what I was just following up on. Is it that as you're opening on your data, does that feature limit how many things you can upload?
Um, I've only tried 4 or 5 documents. But I didn't see a limit. So that's an interesting one. Maybe I'll experiment with that. Thanks for that tip. Like, I'll try to find the edge. I love finding the edge of stuff. So I'm going to upload as many documents as I can, see if I find a limit.
Yeah, that's the good thing to do. I've done experiments with our Python repo
Yeah.
to see how big of a document I could put in. That's actually why I was poking around our government site. So
Yeah.
there I have run into some limits because apparently some PDFs are like 500 megabytes. People have some really big PDFs out there. So we have run into some limits with how large of a PDF can be analyzed by Azure Document Intelligence in a reasonable amount of time. Otherwise, it might time out. And we are working with the document intelligence team to try and figure that out and replicate that issue. So if you do have a large PDF that's breaking Azure Document Intelligence, please send it to us so that we can test that and fix that issue. In terms of limit on the number of files, it's possible that this has a limit. We haven't found it yet, but if it does have a limit, then you might want to just connect to an Azure Blob storage, and that probably, so that one says it does say 16 megabit size limit. Maybe I wonder where that limit comes from. Yeah, so in that case, if your PDFs were above 16 megabytes, then you would want to use like a PDF tool to split them up. That's what we've been telling people so far. I think you can get higher than 16. I've uploaded like a 50 megabyte one using the Python sample. So I don't know where the 16 meg limit came from there. But if you are needing to work around it, then you could use a PDF splitter tool to split them up into smaller files.
And I just tried the blob storage select data source, and that one didn't give me a size limit. like the
Okay.
upload.
Yeah.
So maybe it's the upload
Mhm.
that's putting that limitation. But
Yeah, that would make sense. Yeah.
yeah. So I'll test around this. But this is a fun test. Thank you for that tip.
Yeah. Great questions.
So
Okay. Well, we have 1 minute left. Don't see any more questions. As usual, if there are more questions, please post it in our hackathon forum, and we can try to answer it. Jason says he's also used this this tool using the website as a data source option, and that worked pretty well too.
Oh, yeah. One last comment. I think I had tried that too, and
Oh yeah.
I think the one limitation was it only goes one layer deep. And I don't know if you said, Jason, if you
Yeah.
saw that, but I had it try to go through my own website, and it only went a layer deep, but it did do a great job of going down that layer and pulling information from my website. So that's a fun option to try. And I'm wondering, like you said, Pamela, if you pull the GitHub, if you can, kind of configure it to go several layers deep, or if there's some options.
Yeah, if you pull the GitHub, it actually has a separate data ingestion script in there that's not necessarily using, because when you do the data ingestion here, it's using kind of behind the scenes ingestion code. The GitHub has its own like open source data ingestion code. So there, it's more manual. So you would need to, manually bring in the URLs. And I don't even know if it parses URLs. When I wanted to parse a website, what I did was I actually exported each of the pages to PDF first, and I have a blog post about that. But like, I found all the URLs by scraping using Python and Beautiful Soup. Then I used Playwright to save each of them as a PDF. And then once I had all those PDFs, I just treated them the way I treat PDFs.
Gotcha.
So that was my hack for parsing a website. And I talked about that, I think, in the customizing session we had earlier. Yeah. If it's only going one layer deep, here's the other thing you do is maybe you can make a sitemap. Back in the day, we used to have sitemaps for our websites, a sitemap.xml, or you could just make like a table of contents, right? Like if you had a page that linked to every other page, maybe you could point this at that page and maybe it would grab all the links. I honestly don't know what its logic is, but that would be something I would try to be like, well, if I had a proper index that linked to every single page I wanted to be indexed, would it work if I put it in there? Maybe. I don't know the logic that it's using for what to pull.
Yeah, I'm going to chase this one down too, because I could see intranet. We have all of these documents, HR, you go into the portal and then you've got multiple layers deep, but just mapping it to your intranet site and then pulling all your HR documents, for example. And then, Cosmos was the only other one we didn't touch on today, but what fun. It's been a lot of fun to do this.
That's awesome. Yeah. So hopefully this will give people ideas about how to get started with doing RAG chat applications without having to get, real deep into the code. Because it can certainly get a little hairy in these code bases. All right.
And if they get stuck, I've seen your videos. Go find Pamela's videos. They're great.
Thank you, Charles.
Yep.
All right. So let's finish up today. We a little over. That's okay. We don't actually have a limit here. So thank you, Charles, so much for going through that with us. It's so fun to learn things together and to see what you've done with it. So for those of you who are interested, you can still register for the hackathon. We have 3 days left in the hackathon, but hey, you could go ahead and just 26 minutes, make your chat application and put some cool data in it, and that could be your hack, right? So I like the idea of encouraging these low code hacks as well. But if you do want to go deeper into the code, we do have this repo here, the Azure Search OpenAI demo, which is really designed for deployment. And we have a guide about how to deploy from a free account, like a student account, and that's what a lot of folks have been doing. So that's another option if you do want to go the high code approach. We have that repo for you. So now you've got several options for how to make these AI chat apps. And then heck, bring your own data, bring your own ideas to it. Post in our forum if you have any questions. So we have this forum for the hackathon. That's where you can post lots of questions. And that's also where we post the links from these sessions as well. And submit your project before February 12th, before our deadline to win the prizes. So let's take a look at our, so here's the project submission form and the deadline. And then the prizes, we have best overall, best data source, best in your own language. So we're looking for non-English there, and most helpful community member. And all of these are getting cash prizes.
Ooh.
So yeah, we like so cool prizes. And also on Monday, we're going to have a project showcase. So if you consent on the submission form to having your project shown, we'll try to show as many projects as we can to show all the different ways that you can use RAG. I'm saying there's so many different ways. And we're also going to show some demos from some engineers at Microsoft as well. So that will be our last session, will be that Monday project showcase. We are nearing the end of our hackathon now. It's been very cool. Been having great sessions, loving all the questions and comments. So thank you everyone for always being so engaged, and to our speakers for sharing their knowledge. And we'll say bye now. Thank you, everyone. Thank you,
Bye,
Charles.
everyone.